I'm preparing for our next webinar, which is August 26th. That's a Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the series is around playing to your strengths to build resilience during COVID. Now, in the last webinar, which you can get a link to, just simply request one from me, addressed how to look at your Clifton strengths using the Core Clarity system and find out what your dominant mode of recharge or rejuvenation is. Is it cognitive? Is it relational? Is it being outgoing with a group of people, kind of social connection? Or is it action-oriented? And there's mixes. And we also talked about that we're all going through one of the 5 stages of grief. The first is denial. Most people are out of denial, although I will have to say, part of denial is just not moving forward. It's hoping and thinking things will get back to some kind of normal or hanging on. That's another form of denial. The second is anger. The third is buffering by bargaining, trying to find trade-offs that make hard decisions more palatable without actually making those hard decisions. Then there is a deep trough that many go into. And in a future webinar, I'm going to talk about how this links to one of the phenomenons on mass disaster recovery. There are emotional stages that populations go through, which means workplace populations, after a mass disaster. And it's really important to know it has some similarities to Kubler-Ross, but there's some differences. This deep trough in the Kubler-Ross model is called depression. In going through mass disaster, populations go through something similar called disillusionment. And that's particularly what's happening at this stage when many thought that we would be ramping up, getting ready for the fall, colleges, workplace, and now all of that's getting setting aside. Having your hopes raised and then dashed has a far greater effect on our psyches than we tend to take into account. I'd like to share with you a letter. I received several comments and emails from last week in terms of how helpful some of these frameworks are. So this coming webinar is also going to be a framework around post-traumatic growth. But I'd like to read parts of this letter just to let you know that identifying some of these gives you power to begin to manage it. So I just wanted to let you know that my wife and I listened to your webinar last week, and it had a big impact on us. We realized that I'm in the final stage of the grief cycle, and I'm beginning to get to acceptance and looking forward to that next adventure. What we realized is that my wife is still stuck in that depression stage, and now we understand why when we looked at her strengths. It makes a lot of sense. So without going into the rest of the email, the bottom line is that the husband is wired with cognitive and action strengths, doesn't have any of the social needs that a lot of people have. He has none of the relational strengths, none of the motivational strengths. So all he has to do is hunker down, think, get work done. In a lot of ways, what he said is this has been a great time for him to really work on the guts of the business, innovation, new products. However, his wife, who is homeschooling, has 4 of her 5 strengths in the relational and motivational. This is draining because she's not able to feed these strengths. So I hope last week helped some of you better understand some of the sources of the things draining you during this period, some of the things that can energize you, and then how can you shift your energy or focus or reframe what you're doing so that you can tap into those intuitive, natural, instinctive strengths that release dopamine when you tap into them and recharge you. This coming webinar is going to deal with post-traumatic growth. I've been working on this for over 15 years in my own life, just as a standard discipline and practice. Mindset, playing to my strengths, key vital relationships. You need at least 5 key relationships that will hold you to your best, will help you and encourage you during tough times. If you have fewer than 5 key relationships and at least 1 key relationship at work, then this can be a drain area for you. Rest and recovery, I'll go into more detail there. Meaning and purpose in what you're doing. Seeing an end. Seeing that these events are leading to something more meaningful for you, your family, for your career. for the citizenship that we all have. And then finally, a sense of daily accomplishment. Those are the 6 attributes that we will unpack next week. I think they're crucial for us, especially today. I also feel they're essential practices just in life in general. These are part of a flourishing life. So please register, tune in next week. If you miss it for any reason, send me a note. We are recording and I'll send you a link. Share this with others that you think, man, maybe they're a little bit burnt out. Maybe they're struggling a little bit. This will be a very encouraging, practical, easy to follow, not necessarily easy to do framework for how to build resilience during this time of the COVID recession. Take care. I look forward to seeing you next week.